The law isn't always a noble lion. Sometimes it's just a system that has forgotten its own purpose. We're about to explore those moments of pure, institutional madness. This isn't a list of tickets. It's a curated gallery of humanity's most gloriously absurd and logic-defying penalties, the exact moments where common sense was officially overruled. 1. A man in Connecticut was brutally attacked by a beaver while trying to pull his young daughters out of a lake. He fought back, but not without suffering serious bites. After receiving rabies shots, his ordeal was not over. The State Department of Environmental Protection fined him for illegally trapping the beaver. From a legal standpoint, his desperate act of self-defense was classified as poaching. This is a striking example of bureaucratic victim blaming, where a rabid animal had better legal standing than a father protecting his children. 2. A woman in Geneva was fined the equivalent of $250 for laughing too loudly in public after 10 p.m. The official complaint stated her laughter was disturbing the peace. Apparently, the sound of pure, unadulterated joy is now a public menace. You have to wonder what kind of city is so quiet that the biggest threat to public order is a happy person. 3. For over 150 years in England, the government fined people for excessive use of sunlight. The infamous window tax treated windows as a luxury, so the more you had to pay. To avoid ruinous fines, people did the only logical thing. They bricked up their windows, plunging their homes into darkness and causing widespread health problems. This is a perfect historical example of how the government literally fined its citizens for using sunlight. 4. In Singapore, failing to flush a public toilet after use can land you a fine of around $150. Now, on one hand, this sounds like a great idea for basic hygiene. But on the other hand, you have to wonder about the enforcement. Are there undercover toilet police on patrol, listening for the telltale sound of a flush? Do they burst out of a stall yelling, "Freeze! Put your hands up and step away from the non-flushed porcelain"? The logistics are a bureaucratic nightmare. 5. For years, the European Union had a regulation number 1677/88 that specified the exact acceptable curvature of a banana. And yes, for a while, selling improperly curved bananas could technically result in a fine for the producer. This law became the poster child for ridiculous overregulation. The idea of a government official with a protractor measuring fruit is the peak of human absurdity. 6. A woman in Rhode Island began receiving parking tickets in the mail. The problem was the car they were for had been stolen from her months earlier. She sent the police a copy of the theft report. The tickets kept coming. She then found out the car had been found, towed to an impound lot, and crushed for scrap. She sent proof of the car's legal execution. The tickets kept coming. The city's automated system was so powerful and so stupid, it continued to fine a car that no longer existed in physical reality. 7. A father in Pennsylvania was issued a $100 fine because his 4-year-old daughter was drawing on the sidewalk with chalk. The official charge was vandalism and graffiti. The local police defended the ticket, saying that while chalk is temporary, a complaint is a complaint. They put a child's colorful hopscotch game in the same legal category as spray painting a bridge. At what point does a neighborhood's obsession with pristine sidewalks become an attack on childhood itself? 8. A postman in the UK was delivering mail on his route when a resident complained that his singing was too loud and annoying. Instead of telling the resident to get a life, the local council investigated. They sent an official to follow the postman, who confirmed that he was in fact singing. The postman was then hit with an £80 fine for causing a noise nuisance. The man was literally bringing people their mail with a song in his heart, and the system punished him for it. 9. This one is just beautiful. A man in New Zealand had his pants spontaneously combust due to a chemical reaction from weed killer he'd been using. As he was being treated for his burns, the police issued him a fine for illegally carrying an explosive device. You can't make this up. The man's pants exploded against his will. and he was the one who got in trouble. That's not adding insult to injury. That's adding a fine to an explosion. 10. An officer in Florida pulled over a 95-year-old man for going 90 miles per hour in a 50 zone. When asked why he was speeding, the elderly man explained that he was desperately trying to get his sick wife to the doctor. The officer, doing his job, wrote the ticket. But when the man appeared in court, the judge did something incredible. He looked at the man's spotless 60-year driving record, listened to the story, and said, "You're a good man. I am hereby dismissing your ticket." He then praised the man for his devotion to his wife, a rare moment where the system wasn't dumb at all. 11. A woman in England received a parking ticket for a toy car. Her 3-year-old daughter had parked her little pink plastic convertible on the street, and a traffic warden whose dedication to the rulebook clearly outweighed their sense of proportion slapped a full-sized penalty notice on its tiny windshield. The fine was, of course, a mistake and quickly canceled. But the image of that moment is a perfect monument to someone just going through the motions without engaging a single brain cell. 12. A Swedish man was fined for trying to split atoms in his kitchen. Richard Handel, a self-described hobbyist, managed to acquire radioactive materials and was attempting to build a working nuclear reactor on his stovetop. When he called Sweden's radiation authority to ask if his project was legal, they understandably sent the police. He was fined for possessing unauthorized nuclear material. You almost have to admire the ambition, even if it could have turned his entire apartment complex into a crater. 13. A crew of firefighters in the UK returned to their fire engine after extinguishing a dangerous blaze, only to find a parking ticket on the windshield. Their violation: parking in a restricted area while they were inside the burning building, saving lives. The penalty was issued by an automated camera system that was completely oblivious to the emergency. It's the ultimate bureaucratic short circuit. The very system designed to help firefighters ended up fining them for doing their job. 14. An Australian man was fined for letting out a massive burp. In 2009, Trent Verdon was walking down the street with his friends when he let rip a belch so powerful it caught the attention of a nearby police officer. The officer promptly wrote him a $500 ticket for offensive noise. The story went viral, and Verdon became a local hero. People even raised money to pay his fine, celebrating his right to be gloriously, thunderously rude. The charge was eventually dropped, marking a major victory for loud burpers everywhere. 15. If you're visiting the beaches of Eraclea, near Venice, don't get too creative with your bucket and spade. The town has an official ban on building sandcastles. The rule was put in place because the sandcastles were deemed an obstruction that could impede walking along the shoreline. So, a classic harmless childhood activity that lasts until the next high tide is now a finable offense. Is there anything more symbolic of a war on fun than fining a child for building a castle made of wet sand? 16. A traffic warden in the UK once ticketed a piece of public art. It was a life-sized wireframe sculpture of a classic car installed for a local arts festival. The warden, in an incredible display of tunnel vision, saw a car-shaped object parked illegally and simply did their job, slapping the ticket on its non-existent windshield. The fine was obviously canceled, but it remains a perfect tribute to someone following the rules. 17. A tourist in Florence, Italy, learned a very expensive lesson about where to eat his lunch. He sat down on the steps of a historic church to enjoy a simple panino and a Coke. Moments later, he was handed a fine for €500, about $550. The city has strict rules against undignified behavior near its landmarks, which includes eating on what they consider holy ground. That single sandwich turned into a meal that cost more than a round-trip flight for some people. It's one thing to want to keep your city clean, but it's another to financially crucify someone over a snack. 18. A family in France was hit with a fine for building a snowman in their front yard that was deemed too large. A neighbor filed a complaint, arguing that the 3-meter-tall snow sculpture was an unauthorized structure that was blocking their view of the mountains. Instead of laughing it off, the local authorities actually investigated and issued a penalty. It was a formal, government-backed complaint against Frosty. 19. You'd think a police horse on duty would be exempt from parking rules. You would be wrong. In the UK, a police horse named Invincible was left in a taxi zone while his officer responded to a call. A traffic warden, apparently immune to context, saw a violation and did their job with robotic precision. They wrote and placed a parking ticket on the horse. Let that sink in. A civil servant ticketed a member of the mounted police force, who happened to be a 1,000-pound animal. The ticket was immediately cancelled, but it remains a beautiful example of someone following the rules so blindly they failed to notice the offender could be fed a carrot. 20. In Germany, a man was fined for being too ugly to enter a nightclub. After being denied entry, he got into an argument with the bouncer. The police were called, and they sided with the club, issuing the man a fine for his aggressive behavior. The bouncer's official justification for denying him entry, which he told the police, was that the man's face was simply not up to the club's aesthetic standards. It's one of the few fines in history based on a subjective review of your face. 21. The city of San Francisco, a place that prides itself on its coffee culture, once fined a small, independent coffee roaster thousands of dollars. Their crime? The smell of roasting coffee beans. A single neighbor complained that the aroma was too strong, and the Regional Air Quality Board was forced to act. They classified the scent, that glorious, universally loved smell, as a public nuisance, the same legal category used for industrial pollutants. An agency created to protect lungs from toxic fumes was weaponized against one of the most pleasant smells known to humanity. 22. If you're driving through France, make sure your car is impeccably clean. A man was pulled over and fined 68 euros by French police, not for speeding, not for a broken taillight, but because his vehicle was deemed excessively dirty. There is a law that states a car must be clean enough for the license plate to be clearly visible, but this particular officer interpreted that to mean the entire car. It's a fine that effectively weaponizes your own laziness against you, turning a simple road trip into a high-stakes car beauty pageant. 23. A British man named Laurie Phillips grew tired of watching children and elderly people struggle to cross a dangerous road in his town. So he took matters into his own hands and, for about $200, painted his own crosswalk. The result? The local council fined him £130 for vandalism and then sent a crew to scrub his helpful artwork off the street. They punished a citizen for doing a job they should have done years ago. When does following the rules officially become the enemy of doing the right thing? 24. In a classic battle of nature versus neighborhood association rules, a family in a U.S. suburb was repeatedly fined because their rooster crowed in the morning. The rooster was simply doing what roosters have done since the dawn of agriculture. But to their neighbors, this was not a charming rural alarm clock. It was a violation of the local noise ordinance. The family was hit with escalating fines, starting at $50 and threatening to climb into the hundreds, for failing to control the crowing. This is a fine for an animal behaving precisely as nature programmed it to. It's like issuing a ticket to a cloud for raining during a parade. 25. In Gainesville, Georgia, it is technically illegal to eat fried chicken with anything other than your fingers. This law was passed in the 1960s as a publicity stunt to promote the city as the poultry capital of the world. While it's rarely enforced, a 91-year-old tourist was once playfully arrested for using a fork. The city's mayor pardoned her immediately. It's a fine that exists purely to celebrate a culinary tradition and to make sure you get your hands greasy. 26. A man in Spain was fined 3,000 euros by his local government for a very unusual offense. His building was casting a shadow. The shadow from his newly constructed warehouse was falling onto an ancient Roman aqueduct nearby. The Historical Preservation Society argued that the shadow was causing visual contamination and could encourage moss growth. He wasn't fined for touching the landmark, but for the crime of blocking the sun in a very specific spot. At what point does preserving the past just become an excuse to punish the present? 27. In London, ice cream trucks are subject to very specific rules about the music they play. They are forbidden from playing their chimes for more than 12 seconds at a time and are not allowed to play them at all within 50 meters of a hospital, school, or church. An ice cream man was once hit with a hefty fine for playing his jingle for a few seconds too long. It's a perfect storm of British bureaucracy, where even the joy of a Mr. Whippy is regulated down to the second. 28. We all know about fines for driving too fast, but you can also get a ticket for driving too slowly. In many places, going significantly under the speed limit is considered impeding the flow of traffic, and it can land you a fine and points on your license. It's a legal penalty for an abundance of caution. Imagine a nervous new driver or a tourist lost in an unfamiliar city getting ticketed for trying to be safe. It's the law's way of saying that being overly hesitant can be just as disruptive as being reckless, effectively punishing you for not being confident enough. 29. A 5-year-old girl in London set up a lemonade stand to serve people heading to a music festival. She was approached by 4 enforcement officers who handed her father a $150 fine for trading without a license and promptly shut down her tiny business. After a public outcry, the council apologized, but the moment remains a stunning display of bureaucratic overkill against a child's first lesson in capitalism. 30. A homeowner in the UK received a formal warning and then a fine from his local council for an item in his front yard. The offending object? A novelty garden gnome. After a neighbor filed a complaint deeming the ornament indecent, the council sent official letters demanding its removal, citing rules on offensive displays. This wasn't just about a gnome. It was a taxpayer-funded war on tacky lawn decor. 31. In California, a paddleboarder was fined over $1,000 for getting too close to a pod of humpback whales. A drone pilot captured the footage of the man floating near the massive creatures. While the Marine Mammal Protection Act is crucial, the specific charge was whale harassment. This raises an interesting philosophical question. How do you prove a whale feels harassed? It's a massive fine based on interpreting the emotional state of an animal the size of a bus. 32. In the city of Chicago, it is, to this day, illegal to fly a kite in a public park. This isn't some forgotten piece of legal trivia. It has been enforced. The law was originally intended to prevent kites from tangling in overhead telegraph wires a century ago. Today, with no telegraph wires in sight, you can still get slapped with a fine for enjoying a simple, windy afternoon. It's a solution that has outlived its problem by about 100 years. 33. A man in Montreal was driving his car, windows down, singing along to the classic 90s hit, "Gonna Make You Sweat, Everybody Dance Now." A police officer heard him, pulled him over, and gave him a $149 ticket for screaming in a public place. The man fought the ticket, arguing that he was just a passionate, if not particularly talented, singer. The case was eventually thrown out, but for a moment, the legal system tried to put a price tag on a bad karaoke performance. How bad does your singing have to be for the police to classify it as a public disturbance? 34. In Wisconsin, America's Dairyland, it is illegal for a restaurant to serve a customer margarine instead of butter, unless the customer specifically requests it. This is a real law. A restaurant could be fined for this dairy-based deception. You can just imagine the undercover butter police running tests on the spread that comes with your dinner rolls. Book 'em, Lou. It's a clear case of oleo fraud. It's a beautiful tribute to the power of the dairy lobby. 35. In a drought-stricken part of California, a family was fined hundreds of dollars by their homeowners association. Their offense? They had a patch of dead grass in their front yard. They were being penalized for failing to maintain landscaping, while also being encouraged by the state to conserve water. It's the ultimate catch-22. Get fined by your HOA for a brown lawn, or get fined by the state for using too much water. You just can't win. 36. After a major storm swept through a Florida city, leaving downed trees and damaged property in its wake, homeowners began the long process of cleaning up. But one resident found a little something extra in their mailbox: a fine from the city. Their crime? A fence, which had been destroyed by the hurricane-force winds, was now in violation of the city code, requiring all fences to be in good repair. The ink on the emergency declaration was barely dry, and the city's first response wasn't to offer help, but to issue a penalty. It's a perfect illustration of a system that sees a disaster not as a tragedy to recover from, but as a fresh new source of finable infractions. 37. In Germany, where order is not just a suggestion, an office worker can technically be fined for having a messy desk. This falls under workplace safety regulations. The argument is that a cluttered desk could be a fire hazard or could cause an injury if something falls. While rarely enforced with a formal fine, employers have used this rule to issue official warnings, creating a world where your disorganized pile of paperwork is a legitimate safety violation. 38. In the United Kingdom, it was once considered an act of treason to place a stamp bearing the monarch's image upside down on a letter. While this is rarely, if ever, enforced today, the law is technically still there. Think about that. You're in a hurry. You slap a stamp on a birthday card for your grandmother, get it slightly crooked, and you've committed the same category of crime as someone trying to overthrow the government. It's a powerful reminder that the post office used to be very, very serious business. 39. Picture this. You drop a friend off, and as you drive away, you give a quick, friendly beep beep with your horn to say goodbye. That harmless gesture can get you a ticket. In most places, a car horn is legally designated as an emergency warning device only. Using it for any other reason, including a friendly farewell, is an unnecessary use of a horn and is a finable offense. It's a law that, if strictly enforced, would make all of us criminals. 40. If you're planning a trip to Barbados, Jamaica, or a dozen other countries, leave the camouflage at home. It is illegal for any civilian to wear camouflage clothing. The pattern is reserved exclusively for the nation's military. Tourists who arrive wearing camo shorts or carrying a camo backpack are regularly pulled aside at the airport, forced to change, and issued a fine on the spot. It's a fashion choice that can accidentally get you in trouble with a foreign government. 41. In Dubai, flying a drone without a proper license can result in a massive fine. That makes sense. But a tourist found out the hard way that this applies even if you're not the one flying it. He was fined over $300 after a drone, operated by a commercial photographer he had hired, flew too close to a hotel. He wasn't the pilot, he didn't own the drone, and he had no control over its flight path. He was simply the customer, and for that, he was held financially responsible for a pilot he had trusted to follow the rules. 42. Let's talk about precision. A mother in the United Kingdom received a $100 fine for a parking job that was almost perfect. Her offense? One tire was resting just inches over the white line of the parking bay. She wasn't blocking anything, just slightly askew in a regular spot. The ticket was issued by a private company's automated camera system, a machine with no soul or sense of proportion. It's a perfect example of a penalty that has nothing to do with safety and everything to do with a system designed to profit from the smallest human imperfections. 43. In several towns across the United States, you can be fined for wearing sagging pants. We're talking about fines that can range from $25 to $500 for the crime of indecent exposure via your underwear's waistband. It's a law that turns fashion police into actual police and a questionable style choice into a finable offense. 44. A doctor in Germany was racing to the hospital to perform an emergency life-saving surgery. He was caught by a speed camera going well over the limit. He was later sent a fine and noticed that his license would be suspended. He appealed, explaining the situation and even providing a letter from the hospital confirming the emergency. The court's decision? The fine and suspension stood. The law, they argued, makes no exception for doctors saving lives. It's a chilling moment when a rule designed to protect people is used to punish someone for doing exactly that. 45. In parts of Switzerland, it is illegal for a man to urinate while standing up after 10 p.m. in an apartment building. This isn't about hygiene. It's about acoustics. The law exists because the sound of the stream hitting the toilet bowl is considered a noise violation that can disturb sleeping neighbors. So, for the sake of public peace, late-night relief must be a silent, seated affair. It's not just a suggestion, it's a rule that can lead to a fine, turning a basic biological function into a matter of civic duty and noise abatement. 46. In a small town in Quebec, a man was fined $100 for backing into his own driveway. For years, he had been parking this way for safety, so he could pull out into traffic with a clear view. But a new bylaw was passed, and an officer decided to enforce it with zero tolerance. The man wasn't blocking the sidewalk or creating a hazard. He was just parking on his own property in a way the town had suddenly decided was wrong. 47. In a world of high-tech traffic enforcement, a Belgian man received a speeding ticket for traveling at 654 kilometers per hour. That's over 400 miles per hour. The vehicle in question? His bicycle. Apparently, a glitch in the automated camera system misread his details or had a spectacular digital meltdown. He received a formal demand for payment for breaking the sound barrier on 2 wheels. It's a beautiful reminder that our smartest systems are only as smart as their dumbest glitch, and that no algorithm can compete with the simple, undeniable laws of physics. 48. In Germany, a professional soccer player was fined by his own club for damaging the field. His crime? He celebrated scoring a crucial goal by doing a knee slide, which, yes, tore up a small patch of very expensive grass. The club's management, in a stunning display of corporate logic, saw not a moment of athletic triumph but an act of property damage. They hit him with a fine for unprofessional celebration. It is perhaps the only time in history a player has been punished for being too passionate, too successful, and too into the moment of victory. 49. A man in the UK was fined $150 for littering. His crime? He was taking out his trash when a single, used tea bag fell out of a hole in the bag and onto the pavement outside his home. A council enforcement officer witnessed this tiny act of accidental spillage, classified it as fly tipping, a term usually reserved for dumping truckloads of waste, and issued the penalty. It was a fine that treated a rogue Lipton bag with the legal seriousness of an industrial waste disaster. Alright, we've gone through 49 points and only one remains. But before we get to our final number, it's time for the final verdict. In our opinion, the award for the single dumbest fine on this list goes to the European Union's war on improperly curved bananas, just because it represents the absolute peak of bureaucratic madness. It's a fine born from a universe where there are no real problems left to solve, so we might as well start regulating the geometry of our snacks. Do you agree with our verdict? Or did another point deserve this dubious honor? Let us know in the comments what you think. And now, our final number. 50. In Milan, Italy, there's an old law that requires citizens to smile at all times in public. The only exceptions are for funerals and hospital visits. If you're caught with a frown on your face, you can be fined. Imagine having a terrible day. Your car broke down, you spilled coffee on your shirt, and your boss is a nightmare. And on top of all that, you get a ticket for not looking happy enough about it. It's forced positivity, enforced by law. So ends our journey through moments when rules, norms, and common sense completely broke down. These stories aren't just funny. They remind us that the systems we create to bring order can sometimes lead to pure, wonderful absurdity. So now we want to hear from you. What is the silliest or most petty punishment you have ever personally received? Tell us your story in the comments. If you enjoy questioning the sanity of the modern world, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell. We still have a lot to explore.